Thanks for joining us today. We're going to give the rest of the attendees a few more minutes to join us. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started while everyone is trickling in. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you're having a great day so far. My name is Amanda from Melissa, and I am today's moderator for the Unison Platform Showcase webinar. I am joined by our presenter, Chris Moller, one of Melissa's finest sales engineers and Unison experts. Chris will be taking you through a quick look into the features and functionality of our platform, Unison, and how it can solve your data quality needs. But before we get to the presentation, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. As Chris and I are both recording this webinar from our homes, please bear with us if there are any unexpected audio interruptions. We will do our best to keep the webinar continuing smoothly. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the chat box to the right of the presentation screen at any point during the presentation, and we will save them for the Q&A following Chris's presentation. Should we run out of time and not be able to address all of the inquiries, Chris will connect with you afterwards. His contact information will also be posted at the end of the presentation for your reference. A replay of the webinar will be available and sent to you 24 hours following the end of today's recording. If you happen to experience any technical issues such as losing audio, you can click the top red button labeled Reconnect to be reconnected. If the problem persists, we have found that closing out the webinar page and rejoining using the same link that was provided to you has worked. Should we experience any technical issues on our end, we will quickly restart the session and all be placed into a new room. You don't have to do anything except hang tight. That's it for our housekeeping items. So now I'll hand it over to Chris.
Thanks, Amanda, for that introduction. My name's Chris, and I'll be guiding us through the Unison presentation and demonstration today. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and hop right in. So first off, we'll ask, what is Unison? Unison is Melissa's data quality and data cleansing solution in an enterprise-level environment. Through Unison, you'll have access to powerful matching and deduplication technology, along with address verification in 240-plus countries and territories. Inside Unison, there's very intuitive user interfaces that many people are able to use. It's a highly scalable solution, and it comes in two versions, the SaaS and on-premise version. Some of the quick benefits of Unison are it's a fast and comprehensive data cleansing solution. It has easy to understand reports that are generated for each project run in the Unison environment, and the ROI for data quality is extremely high using this product. For the on-premise version of Unison, all the data files that Unison uses are stored locally on the user's environment, and so there's no callouts to any of the Melissa services. And it's also an easy scalable solution since the user has direct access to all the hardware that Unison is running on. For the Unison SaaS version, all the data files are stored in the Melissa-hosted data center, and each user is going to have a unique private instance of Unison that no one else is going to be able to access. As an added bonus for the SaaS version, there's no hardware overhead costs for the end user. And for the future roadmap of Unison, we have two features in our development pipeline. The first is adding in profiling functionality, and the second is adding in a universal or generalized cleansing task to be able to use inside of Unison. And with that, that concludes the demonstration portion. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into, or pardon me, it concludes the presentation portion, and I'm going to go ahead and hop into the demonstration portion of Unison. I'm going to give a couple seconds so that everybody is able to load into the screen sharing bit. And while we're waiting, I'll go ahead and mention that what we're seeing here is the dashboard of Unison. And this is the SaaS version of Unison. And what we see here are some light job statistics for all the different jobs that are on this specific instance, along with some information on kind of which jobs are running. And for this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and walk us through creating two different projects on here. One is going to be a verification project, and the other is going to be a matching project. For the verification side, I'm going to use a pre-built project for ease of access. And inside a verification project consists of 3 easy steps for how to get the project up and running. First is selecting what input you like to use. For the SaaS version, you're able to use a variety of different flat file formats, such as .txt files or .csv files. Once you've uploaded your input file, next step is to add a task on here. We have 4 different verification tasks: name, phone, email, and address cleansing. And then for the address cleansing task, we have a US-only option or a global option. You can have any number of different tasks on a certain project, and you can even have more than one of the same task as well. Once you add a task to the project, you'll configure what the input fields are going to be. And after that, we'll take a look at what the output fields are. For these output fields, you can turn on or off fields you may or may not need, and you could also rename the field as well if you don't like the pre-built names that we have in here. There are also a handful of additional optional fields that you could turn on as necessary. Once you have your tasks configured on the project, the final step is to configure the output file. Again, this is going to be a variety of different flat file formats, such as .txt or .csv. And we'll take a look at what the output fields are. This gives you the last chance to turn on or off what fields you'd like to see. And also, if you'd like to rename them, you can click on the button here and it will take you back to the task where that field came from. Once the output file is configured and set up, you have 2 options to run it. You can either run the project now or schedule the project to run at a later date. Either way, once the project is completed, it will show in this jobs status page. And once the job is done, we'll take a look at what the reports look like for the verification project. When you are in your project, it gives you some light statistics on how long the project ran for and the average number of records per hour. In the report side, it pulls in all the different result codes that were attached to each record in the project and populates them in a nice, easy to read and understand circle graph for here. It also gives you some light statistics on how many different records had each different result code, and we get a short description of what that result code means. And from the reports, we're able to export this report as a PDF to be able to send it off to any people that would need to view the report to see the data hygiene that was accomplished by running it through Unison. Next, we'll go and walk through creating a matching project. Again, I'm going to use a pre-built project for ease of access. And it follows the same general flow of a verification project. There are a few more steps, but we went with a more wizard-based setup so it's easy for the end user to be able to use. Once you give the project a name or a description, we'll select the input sources that you'd like to use for matching, and the matching projects inside of Unison are able to handle more than one input source, so you can match multiple different files together. Once you have your input sources set up, you'll select which columns you would like to use for matching. In this case, I'm going to be matching on the address field for my input file. After you've selected which field you'd like for matching, this is the match configuration step, and it's kind of the bread and butter of what the matching projects are all about. You're going to select which matching method you'd like to use for the project, and if it's a fuzzy matching method, you'll be able to select the threshold for how strict or how loose you'd like the fuzzy matching to be. Again, for the matching methods, we have a variety of different matching methods to fit any user's needs. Once you've configured the matching part with the proper matching methods and the thresholds if necessary, we'll move along to the final step. And what the matching projects do is it optimizes the different matching configurations so you get the fastest running matching project available to you. We have a couple different rules that you can set before you run the project. One is the survivorship rules and one is the golden record rules. For the survivorship rules, you can set different rules for how to populate fields in the golden record that may or may not be completed in the base golden record. So we have a handful of different rules that you can set up here so that your golden record is the most complete golden record possible. We also have rules that you can select for how to determine a golden record. For here, again, we have a variety of different rules, and one of the key ones I'd like to point out is the input source rule. And what this rule does is if you have more than one input file on this project, you can select kind of which input source is going to be considered the master records. Once you have the rules set up, we'll be able to run the project. Again, I've already run this project, so we'll go ahead and take a look at what the results look like. You can, again, view the results through the same job status page. And from here, we have a nice user interface for easily identifying which records had duplicate records and which records were golden records. For the top records, we see that there were a handful of records in each group that were duplicates. And if we expand it, we can see that the two records were in fact the same, and based on the golden record rules that we have in place, it selected this record as the golden record. Once you've seen which records are golden records, which records are unique, and so forth, we also have some nice filtering options, such as filtering by unique records only, so that when you export this file, you will only export the unique records of the run inside of the matching project. And that goes ahead and concludes the demonstration portion, and we'll move into a quick Q&A portion for any questions that you may have had during the demonstration.
All right, so if you have any questions, I'll give everyone a couple minutes and you can type them into the chat box to the right. So I know that you mentioned Unison is highly scalable. How is scalability handled across the platform?
Yeah, so between the two different versions of Unison, the on-premise versus the Unison SaaS version, scalability is handled in two different ways. In the on-premise version, since the end user has access to all the hardware that Unison is running on, they can easily add more nodes and more containers to the Unison environment to speed up processing. For the SaaS version, since all the data files and information like that is stored on Melissa hosted data centers, we have automation functionality in place to increase container counts for specific types of containers, such as a global container for global address verification or an address container for the US address verification, so that when there are increased loads of projects running in, we'll scale up more containers to meet those needs and then scale them back down once the projects are finished.
Great. What about what are some average throughput numbers?
Yeah, so for the US address task, US-only address task, we've seen throughputs of about 4 to 5 million records per hour. And then for the global address task, we've seen about 1 to 2 million records per hour on there. The global one is slightly slower because it has more data files to reference.
And then what types of input are supported?
There are a variety of different types of inputs between the two versions. For the on-premise version, it is able to handle flat files such as .txt or .csv files. It's also able to create connections to a handful of different databases such as MySQL, Microsoft SQL, or Oracle databases. And for the Unison SaaS version, it's able to handle inputs in the flat file format such as .txt or .csv.
And then is there also a trial available for Unison?
Yeah, we have different types of trials. The most basic one is a 30-day trial of Unison that you'll be able to access all the different features of Unison in the different formats.
Great, and I've actually pushed over an offer. So if you're interested in looking more into a trial, you can go ahead and click through. And then just make sure to include the phrase Unison webinar when you're completing the field and getting all set up for that trial. And then another question is, what other databases are you going to be adding connections to in the future?
There are a couple different databases that we're looking at, such as like Red Hat-based databases or other common databases that we're looking to create connections to in future versions of Unison.
Great. So that concludes our Q&A segment. I just posted Chris's contact information. If you want to get connected with him, you can go ahead and shoot him an email, or we will stick back for a couple minutes and you can go ahead and leave us comments in the chat box, or you can send them privately. Again, we want to thank you for joining us today, and we wish you a great rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
If you hopped on later or you missed any part of the presentation, we will be sending out a recording in 24 hours. And we'll just give it about another minute or so. If you want to send us over any comments, questions, you can do so in the public or private chat box to the right of the presentation. All right, looks like the responses have kind of died down, so we're going to go ahead and end this presentation. Thank you again for joining us.